Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Heartland Mamas. I'm Marie Briel.
And I'm Heidi Henry. And today, Marie, we're going to talk about the status of women in the world.
We are doing a multiple part series defining different parts of everyday life in different countries and the women who live in those countries and face those challenges. So today, our first episode, we're going to focus on women in war.
And you know, Marie, when I was doing research for this podcast, I discovered that we have over 25 plus countries with conflict in them. And, you know, we all think about Afghanistan and Syria and Iraq, but we also have problems in Cameroon, Ukraine, India, the Philippines, Venezuela, Chile, all over Central America, Sudan, Niger. Those keep going on and on and on. And sometimes those are multi-decade long wars. So the problem with that, Marie, is that women just can't seem to escape from war. So, and women die, civilian casualties are exponentially higher with women and children. The UN estimates that 80% of the casualties, the non-armed casualties, the civilian casualties, are women and children. And just in the last 10 years, we've lost over 2 million children. We have about 15 million children that are homeless and about 4.5 million children that are now disabled. I mean, terribly disabled.
Including the numbers of refugees.
No, the refugees, I've got the number for refugees right now.
So this is in addition. The refugees are in addition to this number.
Yeah, so we have
staggering numbers.
40 million refugees in this world. 40 million.
And most of those come from war-torn areas.
Right.
Where they've been displaced either by local government or foreign invasion.
Well, the refugees at our southern border are directly coming from...
Wow, we have a lot of them at our southern border.
Yes, and we have a great deal of them that are coming from wars that have been without end in Central and South America. So they're coming north to try to get some safety. And they're crying out for help, and we just abuse them and take away their children. So we'll talk about that in another episode. So, Murray, the main issue with women in war is women are often not just a casualty of war, but they are a commodity of war. And their commodity is being bought and sold and traded for sexual favors for the fighters. They're also used as forced labor for the fighters' families. They are sold throughout the world. And that is one of the spoils of war, is women, you know, in many countries are considered property and have no rights whatsoever. So when the conquerors come in, they're just like taking chickens out of the chicken coop. We'll take these women and we're going to rape them. We're going to brutalize them.
All the way back to the beginning of civilization.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And I'm not sure why that was ever a good idea, that when you conquer a land, unless it was for procreation of a new, like, your line. I don't know. I'm talking Vikings way back.
Well, they said, you know, having Viking heritage in my blood and Scottish and Irish, the red-haired gene can be traced right back to those Vikings, you know.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, part of that is that when you can demoralize women, when you can make them feel less than human, less than valuable, with no place in the world, by leaving them pregnant, uneducated. But in war, when they're impregnated or have children by their conquerors or their abductors, or they are...
or they have children in general, because then their children are used against them.
Right. Their children are used as a weapon, but they also are often infected with sepsis from being brutalized, from being gang raped, and they can also have HIV or AIDS. So all of those things become a stigma to them, and they're then outcast from their own society. So they are not only used as a commodity, but they're weaponized by becoming a constant reminder to their village or their town or their community that they were brutalized in war, that they have children, offspring from that. And in some countries, becoming pregnant, losing your virginity, having a child as an offshoot of war is cause for you to be murdered by your family, by your community, by the elders in your community. Honor killings are huge.
Even much less than that. Someone who is merely perceived as being
yeah.
inappropriate
Right.
or potentially perceived could bring great shame. So if you take that cultural expectation and add to it,
Yes.
violent conflict areas, you're going to see exactly why a village wouldn't take them back, or a family, or
Right. Well, in South and Central America, you hear stories from time to time about women who offer people passing through their village food or water or medicine or shelter. And that perception by their elders in their community means that their lives are in danger and they flee. They leave for the United States and hopefully find some safety, and yet there's no safety here for them.
right.
So where can they go? What
There's
can they
no
do?
safety in any country for women.
No.
Let's be honest.
This is one of
if
the
a
most-
woman flees the country by herself or with her child or her family, and she gets to another country, she's a refugee. She's put in a vulnerable situation yet again. And then you have to talk about the abuses that happen at refugee camps and the abuses by other soldiers.
Human trafficking is huge in refugee camps. The perpetrators of sexual violence are often the guards that are there to protect them, the peacekeepers.
So again, the war causes the women that are able to escape to get out and still be victimized yet again.
Yes. And subdued by the victimization. Subdued because the children are often used as pawns to keep them compliant and complacent. And women, the UN has discovered, will do anything they can to protect their children, even children born of rape by their conquests or by their conquerors. And since they will fight for those children with their very lives, they are often used as bargaining chips.
Mm-hmm.
To, in some societies, to create suicide bombers. Your children will live if you do this. To be drug mules. There's so many.
There are countless reasons.
Yeah.
And that brings us to why. Okay, yes, children are trafficked. Children are used. However, women are the highest percentage of all. You had told me something.
I tell you lots of things, Murray.
She does. And I didn't write it down, even though I was so thoroughly stunned by it.
Yeah.
It was women are the highest percentage of casualties of civilian. Oh, you said that.
Yeah.
She said it already. We were talked about it before.
And here's another thing that happens to them in war is that the military, the conquerors, the warring factions, when they leave the area of the village, often leave behind their refuse, which is often toxic, landmines, chemical weapons, chemical residue, anything and everything that can cause cancer. And the women and children die exponentially from cancer in these war-torn areas. So often they die from starvation because their crops are stolen or burned. And food is used as a weapon of war as well. So,
and all these methods have been around since basically the
they're
beginning of time.
tried and true.
And yet women are still, and we're in how many BC? How many thousands?
We're in 2019,
of years
almost to 2020, and
are we?
We still can't invite women to the table to talk about peace, because when women come to the table, according to the UN, and talk about peace and try to prevent war, war is almost always prevented.
So we turn our attention to countries' leaders who are not women. The percentage of women in positions of leadership in governments is very disproportionate to
less
the
than 4% around the world.
And the number of women overall is
53% of the world's population, but
women.
we make up about roughly 4% of those of people in power, of people making the decisions about going to war, not going to war, of having a nuclear war or chemical war, as opposed to, I don't know, rocks and bottles, And the thing is that since women think through the conflict issues, not just, I'm so mad, I'm going to kick your butt, I'm going to bomb you back to the Stone Age and all that other
what you're
rhetoric.
talking about goes back to everything that we talk about. And part of the reason why we started this podcast is because women think differently than men. We've said it before. We will probably talk about it again.
Yeah.
Women think globally.
Yes.
Women think about their actions and how their actions affect others and how the path of least resistance.
Yes.
That's not saying women can't be egotistical and that women can't be
violent.
stubborn and that violent, but it is such a tiny percentage. Most women think this way.
Yes.
Where men think very linearly. Here's a problem, here's a solution. I'm going to go from the problem to the solution and it's going to be resolved. But they don't take into account those
The
other
collateral
things.
damage. The
Very
collateral
much
damage
so.
are what women think of. They think if you start this war, I
Because
remember
we have been the victims of this collateral damage
for so
since
long.
the beginning of
We've
time.
learned. And I remember I went down to the huge protest in Chicago when we invaded Iraq. So if you remember that way back in the day when we started the Iraq War, the shock and awe of George W. Bush, I was one of those people in the melee down in Chicago. And I remember talking to some Iraqi women as we were walking along Lakeshore Drive. We were singing Beatles songs and carrying candles. It was actually quite peaceful, quite beautiful for a long time. And they told me that they were afraid for their parents that were still there, the elderly, for their siblings that were younger, for their children or grandchildren that still resided there, because they knew that they would suffer the most. That was their worry. It wasn't for Saddam Hussein or his sons. It was for the children, their parents, the elderly, the sick, the infirm. They were thinking about the collateral damage, the pain and suffering that they would have because they couldn't get out of the way. Those that were there were stuck there in the shock and awe. And it's tragic and heartbreaking still to this day because I didn't...
So Heidi, something that I made a connection between here is, women have always been devalued.
Yes.
We are, in many parts of the world considered property. Casualties we don't really are considered in civilian.
Right.
We have such a small percentage of leaders in the world, legislators, leaders in the world,
Yes.
compared to the numbers that we are. So when we talk about that, it makes me wonder, we know since the beginning of time this has happened.
Yes.
Wars have happened since the beginning of time. What else has happened since the beginning of time?
Capitalism, yes.
Has happened since the beginning of time. Now, that's not saying socialism and the other government forms, which we've talked about, have not been on the rise and aren't all over. But war equals money.
Oh, absolutely.
We're going into World War I was not a decision made on morals or beliefs of the United States. It was an economic decision.
Yes.
And the boon that was created from it was we just talked yesterday or last week about arms sales.
Yes.
How much do we make in arms sales?
Oh my
Who
gosh.
heads up those companies? So I'm a guy, right? I don't think about women because they're not even whatever.
Well, and a lot of times, Marie, women's bodies aren't even counted as casualties of war.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so you've got the money.
Yes.
And you've got the lack of respect, the inequity.
Yeah.
And between the two of them, why would they have any incentive to allow women leaders to take a higher role? Why
Marie,
would they encourage women? They wouldn't.
We just talked about Trump Tower, Istanbul, and the reason that Kurds are dying right now at the hands of Turkey. And it is all over money. It is all over money. We did not go to war in Iraq because we thought Saddam Hussein really had weapons of war. He had oil. And our children are dying in the sand to this day for oil, for companies that had our president had his fingers in. So at the time, George W. Bush and also another president who I think is a war criminal, So and I've been very out there, talking about it. And I think that according, again, I've read a lot of UN studies, and when women are invited to the table as part of the peace process for repatriation, for resettlement, for helping work out lasting peace, there is lasting peace. They put things in place to make sure it is a humane resettlement, a humane repatriation, and that there is education for the children, there's programs to prevent violence, there's medical care, there's food for everyone. Those are the things that women bring to the table.
Because women have always been tasked with doing multiple things at once, taking
Yes.
care of people.
Nurturing.
Ugg and Uma birthed the babies and raised them. Ugg went out and hunted.
Right.
So since the beginning of time, women have been caregivers.
Yeah.
And that's in our nature. So we approach things from a different way, like we've talked
Right.
of many times, from with thinking about collateral and thinking about how to prevent something and removal of the big dick in a locker room. Which, I'm sorry, there's a lot of that going on.
We've Murray and I witnessed it firsthand, watching our president pretend he had a giant phallus and was rubbing it at his rally in Cincinnati. It was appalling. It was appalling to see. And the thing is that he's not the only war. Yeah, we need more, women in leadership.
And I was talking to a gentleman who's an older fella. He's in his 70s, and we were talking about it, and I was kind of curious to see where he was on the spectrum of who he was interested in for a candidate.
Yeah.
And he said, I want a woman. And I was like, really? You want a woman, huh?
As a date or no?
No, he said, as president.
Okay, yeah.
And I said, okay. And he said, the last 200 years of this country has been male-directed. We haven't had a woman who's a leader. And quite clearly, us men can't get it right and keep screwing it up. So it's about damn time somebody who thinks differently gets a chance to run the show.
Murray,
and I was like, oh, you cute little guy. Thank you. That was so nice.
But Murray, when our politicians are in there, the president we have now never served in war. None of his family has ever served in war, has ever served in the military. And you can go back multiple generations. To him, it's playing toy soldiers. George W. Bush infamously went AWOL rather than fight. And Barack Obama never served. So when they talk about collateral damage, I don't think they have any idea what that means. Their children haven't gone to war. Our children go to war, not yours and mine, but certainly our friends' children have. Her kids aren't old enough yet. So, it's just not... We have to quit electing people that have no idea what goes on in the real world. And furthermore, when we talk about women in war, when we don't include women in the peace process, when we don't include women in a conversation, when we don't
elect women to be leaders to keep us out of those situations.
Right.
When
Diplomacy.
women don't have a voice at the table as secretaries and prime ministers and say, hey, this is not a good idea.
The war machine is a huge multi-trillion-dollar entity in the United States.
And then war is just fun. Boys like war.
Well, I don't think that's true. I think there's a lot of empathetic, compassionate.
I have yet to meet a boy, and I'm talking child,
Yeah.
who has, even those who have been banished from any and all violent games, no violent TV.
They didn't
PJ
play
Masks.
They played with little pacifists.
No,
no.
But I know families who've raised their kids that way. And I will tell you, those little kids will make the gun with their finger and pew, 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 pew.
Yeah, or their stick.
It is instinct. Or yes, hit a stick, swing a stick like a sword.
Yep.
It is just something instinctual, I have to say.
Which is hardwired. Hardwired for war.
That's not saying that that it's instinctual. That's not saying every man has that. There are exceptions. There are many exceptions.
Yeah.
But a majority, an overwhelming majority function that way. Just like an overwhelming majority of women. So I'm fairly comfortable making this generalization. Don't go all Captain Cuckoo.
No, weigh in on our Facebook page and tell us how Captain Cuckoo.
No. I'm not trying to alienate. I'm saying.
But everybody knows that that's how it falls. Everybody knows that that's how it falls down. We all know. I mean, I'm married to one of the most gentle, kind people on the planet. And one of his favorite pictures from when he was a child is him with his little 6 guns, cap guns, So it's just how, I mean, even my son had a camp gun and he's a huge pacifist.
So, what we're trying to say is that as a country, as a world, it's time women got a larger voice, and that is happening slowly. But until we value women as sentient beings,
Right.
and carries as much weight as their male counterparts.
Oh my gosh.
all over the world.
Murray, ding, 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 ding. Mm-hmm. We don't even have the ERA here in the United States.
No,
and
we don't.
Let me tell you, the world is right now, is at one of the most dangerous points in history for women and children ever in world history. In the United States, we are one of the deadliest countries in the world for women and children to live in.
Also maternal and fetal health rates.
Yes. So we have done a really poor job.
And that's going to be another woman's episode. But
Yes.
for our war, we want to make sure that everyone understands women need a bigger voice in the peace process, in negotiations, in leadership roles, cabinet positions. So let's
Diplomacy.
do our job, because when women are in those positions, as Heidi said, they are far more likely to see armed conflict. And that means that we can start valuing women as human beings and elevating their status, so they're not being used as commodities, so they're not being raped, left back as spoils of war, as examples. We can do something about this. You can do something about this.
You can.
You can vote for women. That's not saying only women, that guys shouldn't run and that you can't be fantastic. I know a lot of guys who are great at what they do, and I wouldn't change it for the world.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have a choice and you're not sure, let's try a new path.
Let's try a different path, because what we've done since time immortal has not worked. It's caused the lives of so many people. We have 40 million people that are refugees right now, all around the world. We know we're on the wrong path, and we can't solve it by locking up children away from their parents at our southern border. That's not the right path. That's just creating more war in the long run, more unrest, and more unease around the world. We need to do a better job of being good diplomats, of being the kind of people that think about the end of resolution before we get into war. That's why we're in Iraq and Afghanistan for so many years now, because we never thought about the end before the beginning. So, Murray, that's about all we have to say about that. And I just want you all to think a little bit. Murray's not a prayerful person. I am. Say a prayer for the people, or hold up a good
little
prayer for you.
Together forever.
Okay, we're not going to sing, Murray.
Oh, sorry.
But I think we have to pay an ASCAP fee now.
Oh, shoot.
It only went on a few seconds.
Okay, good. Thank you for shushing me.
So,
But look for our more parts to this. We'll be doing women in government all across the
we'll
world.
also post, because it is the season of giving right now, some links to some charities that help mitigate the damage of war and the conflict in the issues with women around the world.
And speaking of donating, if you like what we do, I'm going to plug us too.
Yeah.
If you like what we do, please subscribe, like,
Share.
share, and feel free to donate. We'd love to have your support in any way that you can.
And we love your feedback. We love it when you leave us messages on our different subscription sites and
Sorry.
talk to us about how you feel about what we're doing and avenues you'd like to see us pursue. So thank you so much. It's Heartland Mamas, MAMAS.com.
Wherever you get your podcasts,
Yeah.
as well as YouTube. So we look forward to talking to you next time.
Take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.